Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Moeller, the host of the FinTech Forward podcast series, also owner and CEO of Fluxion AI Solutions, creating customized AI solutions for small businesses. Fluxion AI, your trusted growth partner. Today, we have a very special guest, Jeffrey Fidelman. The company is an investment bank focused on helping startups and emerging fund managers raise capital. Prior to founding the firm, he worked at Morgan Stanley and HSBC and later became a partner at a venture fund, giving him perspective from both the institutional and investor sides of the table. A Harvard alum, Jeffrey has spent the past decade advising founders and managers on fundraising strategy, investor positioning, and execution through a disciplined, data-driven approach. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to hear all about yourself and your company and kind of your unique business model and value proposition. So with that, I'd like to open it up to you to just, if you could start, just give us kind of a background and your industry experience, and then we'll kind of dive in specifically into your firm and kind of what they provide to your clients. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah. And thank you again, Stephen, for having me. It's a pleasure to join the podcast here. By way of background, I guess kind of more traditional after college, I went into finance. I spent the better part of a decade, as you mentioned, between Morgan Stanley and HSBC, where, and I'll give you a bit more depth perhaps, where really my vernacular was transformed into way more of an institutional speech pattern. When I came into Morgan Stanley, although I'd been licensed at a financial firm before that, I remember thinking to myself that, everyone around me is speaking English, but it may as well be a totally different language. And I really attribute so much of like my intellectual capital and ability to create these structured solutions to working at larger institutions that had a lot of that structure and consistency put into place as kind of a mandate. And when leaving HSBC, I kind of had a choice of going into consulting. And right as I was about to accept that offer, I received another offer from a family office whom I'd known from kind of past experiences, to help them set up and deploy a venture fund. And that's what I ended up doing. The focus was early stage, tech and tech-enabled companies. And that's really where I was exposed to this white space of fundraising for early stage companies, or even fundraising for emerging managers or managers in general. And I say exposed to that white space because on one hand, you had this institutional approach, very structured, either known or just getting to know investors. But there's a structured approach in doing all of that outreach and setting up data rooms and setting up meetings and running those meetings. And then here I was a few years later speaking with venture companies, venture-backed companies, or trying to be venture-backed companies that were pre-seed and seed. 10 years ago, the terms of pre-seed and seed are different than what they are now, but early stage companies nonetheless trying to raise capital. And that was a mess, from how they were managing it to how they were structuring it to the total lack of consistency around their approach to raising capital. And what's interesting is that when you Google or GPT or whatever anybody uses best practices of raising capital, those best practices have not changed in 30, 40, 50 years since venture was a business or private equity. And yet 10 years ago and even through today, I'm consistently reminded that everyone is looking for this silver bullet or this special sauce that maybe somebody has out there and figured it out. And the reality is that that doesn't exist. So knowing that and kind of having had exposure both to institutional and into venture fundraising, I ended up leaving the venture fund in 2015, which is a little over 10 years ago now, and starting what is now an investment bank specifically focused on early stage companies and emerging managers. So I'll kind of pin it there before I go into what we do today.
Okay, great. So what I'm hearing there is you acknowledge the problem, which was lack of structure for fundraising for startups, early stage businesses. Now, were they mostly technology-focused businesses, or did it cover a broad range of startups?
At the time, it was mostly tech or tech-enabled businesses, meaning they were full-blown like an app or a SaaS platform, or there was some element of like tech enablement for an older business, like a marketplace for dry cleaning in New York City, for example, so stuff like that.
Okay, great. So if we could take that, so that's kind of how it started. Okay, acknowledge here's the need, here's the demand for this. Now, if you would please, Jeff, tell us about how it's grown and evolved and kind of where it is today. Are your clients still primarily tech? Do you go nonprofit? Is it all for profit? Is it who do you provide services to, and any other information you'd like to share?
Sure. So how it started and how it's going, right? So over the past 10 years, we've grown pretty substantially. We have about 40 people with us, all remote, all US and Canadian based. And above and beyond having the ability to prepare fundraising documentation for all of our clients, decks, models, valuations, etc., really our core focus today is fundraise as a service. And that is the productization, as I was talking about before, of helping companies raise capital. So we've gone out and subscribed to PitchBook and Preqin and Fintrix and all of these other platforms. We've aggregated a lot of that data internally. And then we layer an analyst on top of that to do all of the outreach on behalf of our clients. So Alex calls from ABC Company or Alex emails from abc.com. So effectively what we've done is build investment relations infrastructure and then rent that to our clients on a month-to-month basis. And as that business continued to grow and we've seen a lot of success, or clients raising capital through those types of introductions, we started, like with any company, I suppose, having tech issues of our own, meaning the CRM and the pipelining tool and some of the other bits and pieces of infrastructure, we've outgrown them just based on volume and how we were operating. So about a year ago, we endeavored to start building our own platform or operating system that we were using internally. And it dawned on us several months ago that this could actually be an offering to others on a direct basis. So that's something that we are in the process now of launching. It's a fundraising operating system called FundEx, where it's literally what our analysts use at the bank to help our clients through fundraise as a service raise capital. We're now positioning that operating system for founders or managers, frankly, that want to run the process themselves, can do exactly that the same way that our analysts run it. So pipeline management, CRM organizational tool, you can call through the platform, email, all the information, all the communication with investors is there in one place.
Very nice. So I heard two things there. One, acting as, I guess, agent on behalf of your clients and the fundraising efforts. And then two, this new software solution you've developed to where they, whether it's through licensing or whatnot, they could operate it as a standalone system or independently for their CRM. And
exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly
okay.
Right. And look, the reality is what I said earlier. There's no silver bullet in what we do.
Yeah.
So the best we could do is, even for our own internal purposes, was build a platform to make it very straightforward and simple, very structured and repeatable without necessarily needing to access all these different tools or different suites of tools, and just have it in one place. And again, we built that initially for all of our analysts and then realized that other advisory firms, other tech companies, they just want to run the process on their own. They're capable of doing it. So why not just plug into our operating system and then run that process?
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk, Jeff, if you would please, a little bit about kind of your role, like you're as the founder CEO. What is kind of the day-to-day? What are some things you're really focused on? What does a typical day or week look like for you?
A little bit of everything, I suppose. I don't do the calls anymore. The analysts do that type of thing. But my role predominantly, especially going into this year, and I really try to set up initiatives for each year, and we've been doing this now for 2 past years and certainly into this year. And I found that to be really successful for us as a business. And it's not so much of delegation of duties or tasks. It's more about having, I don't want to call it a singular, but maybe 2 or 3 main focal points that every action that I do on a daily basis should ultimately roll up into achieving one of these goals that we have set out for the year. And for this year, it's building and launching FundEx, which is the operating system that I mentioned. It is creating kind of more deep connectivity with the investor network that we already have, as well as developing a broader investor network. And that's not to say we're changing our model in terms of outreach to investors as agents on behalf of our clients, but we've certainly seen a lot of success in sharing our active mandates with investors that know what we do and how we do it, and those investors wanting to have conversations and ultimately move forward with investing in some of our clients. So those are kind of two main initiatives: launching, building, and making sure that FundEx gets off the ground. And then, as you can imagine, it's also a lot of business development, whether it's with new clients or investors.
Right. Okay, very good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if we could please, Jeff, let's talk about technology. Obviously, you're a very technology-centric firm. Talk about the role of technology, maybe where it was, where it is, or where it's going, and how it's kind of impacted and created opportunities for your business. I know you mentioned FundEx, but what are some of the tools that your firm has implemented that have really been successful?
I think technology, much like AI, can be described as a knife. And I heard this somewhere at some talk, and it really resonated with me. And the reason I say compare it to a knife, because on one hand, a knife can be used to cook a beautiful dinner and share a meal and satiate you. On the other hand, a knife can be used to stab and kill someone, right? So it's a tool, is I guess the point of what I'm trying to say. And similar to both AI and technology, you can use it to your advantage, but if you try to over-implement technology or over-implement AI, and we've seen a lot more of this with AI kind of in the news and in the media, then all of a sudden it has the opposite effect that you intended. So on one hand, I think technology, certainly over the past 10 years, has exponentially increased in terms of capabilities, sensitivities, the way to train and to build. And it's impossible now to talk about technology without talking about AI. And in our experience, obviously creating this fundraising operating system called FundEx that we're working on could not have been possible 4 years ago or 3 years ago to build. Or maybe it could have been, but it would have cost $500,000 and a year and a half to get to where we are today. And I say that because, for example, Lovable, and I love using them as an example. I know that there's a few other platforms out there like it, but we ended up building the first iteration, the internal version of FundEx, right in Lovable. And what that enabled us to do was, first of all, save an incredible amount of capital and time. But second of all, when we decided that we were going to commercialize this tool, we took what we had, we hired developers, and we said, we don't need UX, we don't need UI, we don't need wireframing, we don't need project management. Build this and commercialize it. And of course, there was more conversation. I'm oversimplifying a bit, but just by a bit and not a huge amount. And when you think about that, and this is personal experience, and I don't know how many listeners or readers have gone through the same experience, I absolutely recommend any next idea you have, just go into one of these vibe coding platforms and see for yourself what you can do. And more importantly, when thinking about fundraising, when thinking about building a business, it is no longer acceptable to go out and raise capital for an MVP. Take that comment with a grain of salt. You're building a pharmaceutical drug, or you're building a rocket ship, or you're building something that is deep tech. Yes, you need a lot of capital just to get to MVP. But if you're trying to build an application, a simple solution, a workflow, a SaaS business, or anything in between that's kind of web-based or tech-focused, there's really no reason why that can't be built for a few hundred hours and a few $100s on one of those vibe coding platforms.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jeff. I'm also a fan of Lovable. We leverage that in our company. And I completely agree with what you're saying. Technology can be your best friend, or it can be, your demise, right? So that's what, my company, particularly Fluxion AI, we're creating customized AI solutions for businesses. Technology is, and particularly AI, it's become such an ubiquitous term out there that there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is and what it does. So that's the biggest solve, is talking to the client and say, tell me about your business, tell me about what's frustrating, what your challenges are, so that you are getting the right technology, not just some commercial off-the-shelf product that may or may not help you, right? So I completely agree with what you said. So thank you for providing that.
And I'll give you an example on the other side. The not successful example is that we run a very manual process, even to this day. And it involves kind of pulling leads out of our CRM on a weekly basis. Let's call it about 100 plus or minus. Our analyst qualifies them, personalizes them, and then starts the outreach sequence or campaign. And the first implementation of AI that our company had was the qualification and personalization piece, to put AI behind it and let AI run that process. Mm-hmm. And what that allowed us to do was go from 100 to 400. Qualification and personalization was imperfect, but we were getting, call it, false negatives, not false positives. So the positives worked really well. Some that were disqualified maybe shouldn't have been, but we were okay with that. And that ended up enabling our analysts to reach out to a higher volume of investors on a weekly basis. In theory, this sounds great. In practice, we had incredible efficiency gains, but the effectiveness of doing that fell off a cliff. And the reason for that was that although volume had increased by our analysts, they were not doing any of the research, they were not doing any of the personalizations themselves. When they were calling an investor, they would read off of a spreadsheet saying, hey, John, read the first line of personalization that the AI gave them, and that's it. And they would not have anything else to say to this individual. So we ended up ripping that AI out and going back to a manual process. While volume has come down just based on bandwidth, now analysts do take a look at an investor's LinkedIn, his or her socials, his or her fund page, and has or news articles or anything else. So when an analyst now calls an investor, there's way more context to have a discussion about rather than just reading a line saying, hey, you're an investor in FinTech. I'm part of a FinTech company looking to raise. Let's chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine, obviously, personalization, trust, and relationship and lead nurturing is very important to your firm and your clientele, obviously. So totally understand how AI, although helpful, you could lose kind of that personalized touch, right?
Yeah.
But again, we're in the early stages of AI, and who knows where it might be 2 or 3 years from now. But yes, I completely agree. Like, AI can do a lot. It does not necessarily replace that HI, human interaction, that
right.
oftentimes is so pertinent to making deals, right?
Yep.
So, all right, well, good. Let's get back to, I think you talked about kind of where your business is at now and your goals. But, whatever you can share specifically about, 12, 24, 36 months, where you'd like to be, what are maybe 1, 2, 3 things in your business that you're looking to solve for, kind of what's your growth plan, if you can share any of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, on the fundraise as a service side, we continue to grow. On the advisory side, similarly. So I think, like I said before, FundEx is kind of going to be top of mind for me going into this year. We are contemplating doing a fundraise with the focus specifically being on other investment banks and maybe venture funds, so that we can have, it's less about capital coming in, more about strategic alliances that we can create and access to their portfolio of companies. There's a lot of tech development that we still need to accomplish on that side, but really our focus is to create a fundraising operating system for anyone in the market that's looking to raise capital. Whether it's a company, whether it's a fund manager, we have a list of about half a dozen to a dozen advisories, meaning firms like ours, just wanting to use our operating system. And what's interesting is that I spoke about this maybe a year ago, and I could never figure out how to really implement it. But and these things, I guess, ultimately happen in phases. But I remember reading 10 years ago something that I said, I wish I can find something that makes me feel this way. And that something was, if more people did business the way that we do business, the overall market would be better suited, right? Like a rising tide raises all ships. And I say that because many conversations that I go into to position our fundraise as a service type of offering, I have a black eye for a fight I was never in. Because our potential client tells me that, we've worked with advisors, we paid them X amount of thousands of dollars, they never got back to us, they never put us in front of investors. They, for the most part, have this bad experience. And that's also why we took our time in developing fundraise as a service to go in and not necessarily promise or guarantee that capital is going to be raised, because we can't control that. I'm not pitching the business, the client is in front of the investor in a room I'm not even in. But what we can promise is that we will get them in front of qualified and interested investors.
Right.
So when thinking about that process, we really, last year's initiatives, kind of talking about where we were before and going into this year, last year's initiative was really productizing that further into this platform of FundEx, so that now we can go out and essentially sell FundEx. And if other advisory firms want to copy our fundraise as a service offering, then that's better for everyone. They would be better off suited, positioning in front of their clients, actually getting them in front of investors. And we would be better suited as well, because then the term fundraise as a service becomes more and more ubiquitous. All the meanwhile, everyone is running it on FundEx, which is the operating system that we're releasing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So what I'm hearing is creating kind of a standardized structure for fundraise as a service across industry-wide, right? So that that solves the problem that you saw over a decade ago, where it was just kind of disjointed, no real structure. So that's great, Jeff. Outstanding. So,
thanks.
All right. Well, to shift away from business a little bit, I know you're a busy CEO, busy guy, but what does Jeff like to do in his free time? Hobbies, family, sports?
Not much free time. If I'm not at the office, I try to spend my time with family. I've 2 small children, I have a wife, and lots and lots and lots of things to do around the house, because I'm rarely there and mostly in the office. So I like spending time with my family. My kids are 5 and 6. I just got them a original Nintendo, like the original NES Nintendo. And a lot of our time has actually been spent on that. I didn't realize up until about a week ago how difficult the original Mario was once you got into later stages. So we've been playing a lot of Mario. We're on Mario 3 now. I don't know how much you remember, but we're on Mario 3 now, and my kids are like super excited. And the funny part is that they don't even want to play. They just want me to show them an example, and then I end up playing there for like an hour while they're watching.
Yeah.
So I think that's been what's taking up a lot of my time outside of work, playing Mario 3 with my kids.
Oh, I love it. You're taking me back to, yes, I had an original Nintendo. Let's see, Tecmo Super Bowl and Legend of Zelda. And of course,
Zelda's
Mario.
on there, Zelda 2, Legend of Link. All 3 Marios. They have Double Dragon, if you remember that one.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Oh my
So-
gosh,
so
I'm going
we
to have to
all
look
of
into this. I have 2 boys, 6 and 8, so.
They would love, and I want to give them a progression. So, and I've been telling them, first it's Nintendo, then Super Nintendo, then N64, then Wii, then Switch, right? Like I want to take them through the full.
There you go. Good. That's a good plan. All right. Wonderful. Love it, Jeff. I think you might have just identified my son's next birthday present. So
There you go.
all right. Well, Jeff, really appreciate your time, your expertise, your insights. Any closing comments you'd like to add before we wrap?
Closing comments. Well, look, I guess twofold, depending on who's listening and what position they're in. The first is that, in my belief, it's never been a better or simpler, straightforward time to start a business. With all the tools that are out there, with all this AI-supported tools that are out there, it's really, really, really easy to build something tangible and just test out whether or not it works. And at the same token, both applying to building a company or raising capital for a company, or probably like a life lesson, specifically on fundraising though, structure and consistency will allow you to raise capital. The worst thing you can do is have an unstructured approach, email once in a while and not have any consistency behind it, change your copy every other day because your reply rates aren't good. All of that will guarantee failure. At the very least, have a structured and consistent approach, run it for 90 days, run it for 60 days, then take stock of whatever you had done. And then similar to a scientific method, right? You have a hypothesis, control variable, you run your experiment, you have a conclusion, you do it all over again. So we take that approach to fundraising, but quite frankly, we've taken that approach to building this business, and all of the successful entrepreneurs I know have some version of that type of application.
Great. Well, we'll call that a wrap. That's all for today, folks. Again, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. Fidelman Company, check them out. Check out the podcast, FinTech Forward, and I hope to see you all back here soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Stephen.